Okay, it's Ben at Church Universal and Triumphant. I'm just answering questions about Elizabeth Clare Prophet and the Messengerial Legacy. And I had a few that I jotted down here if I can find. Okay, I do have it in front of me here. There's that. There's that. Okay. And what I invite all the, here's my camera over there. What I invite all the Chilas to do is to send me questions, and I'll just post them in the videos as I receive them. And people exterior to the church who want to be in touch with me over the internet, definitely I'm interested in responding. What I do often is I'll receive, information and questions through the airwaves, sometimes from, etheric entities, other times from in angelic forms, and other times from actual people in embodiment right now. But it seems to be the case that direct interaction among the Chilas is somewhat limited by the fact that everybody is holding the balance for each other within the church. So people look at the church and question, I think, whether or not it's dynamic. It is dynamic. It absolutely is dynamic. But because everybody is a sixth rounder and supporting the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which is part of our call and part of our sacred labor, people stay behind. So when it seems that the church isn't acting definitively enough or swiftly enough, it's really because it's all coming into being. It's all evolving in the now, the cosmic now, and so on. It doesn't mean that we don't have to take deliberate steps to move everything forward, because we still do. We still do have to try and so on. But right, what I hope occurs in these online presentations that I offer to you is galvanization, and I hope that I provide motivation for people additionally, and protection as well, and healing, all of those things. So here's a question: why should I worship at your church? And this is a heck of a question to start with. But it's in the news. It's topically interesting to people at CUT right now, because I have been discussing the lawsuit that was brought against the producers of a Netflix TV show that is basically a lampoon of black witchcraft. And it has that lawsuit has consequences for people within CUT, outside of CUT, light bearers, anybody involved in any sort of occultism, and so on. Why should I worship at your church? This is the question. Why should I worship at your church and not through a satanic church or other kind of groups supporting witchcraft if I am powerful within a non-Christian faith such as these groups? So when I take that sentence apart, why should I worship at your church and not through a satanic church, or other kind of group supporting what's interesting to me about it, and this, I was there for the formation of this question, is that the clause that is important, I believe, is if I am powerful within a non-Christian faith such as these groups. So it's not so much putting the devil first for this questioner. It's my power either appears to reside within this non-Christian faith, a non-CUT, non-Christian faith, or psychologically, I don't know the reason. I think sometimes people will ask a question and they think that they want to be contradicted. That happens periodically. If I am powerful, well, I'm not convinced that this questioner believes that he or she is powerful within a non-Christian faith. I'm not sure what is the point of this question is entirely, but it's basically a challenge. Why not Satanism, in other words, or other kind of groups supporting witchcraft? If I am powerful within a non-Christian faith such as these groups, I can't answer that. I don't know what it means to be personally powerful. I would say, and I'm thinking about Elizabeth, because I've heard her answer similar questions about, should I take this path or this path, and with her response being, I can't answer that for you. I can only teach based upon experience. I've just seen mothers say that she can't make certain forms of decisions for people, and that's good because there should be free will in engaging her mantle. But obviously, in many instances, she'll give very direct answers. Additionally, but why should I worship at your church and not through a satanic church or other kind of group supporting witchcraft? Because Satanism is wrong-headed and will lead you into darkness. I don't I don't know how to answer it other than that. Is it possible for someone to be on a quote-unquote dark occult path and still have a vibrant life? Yes, I would imagine, but I don't think that it happens. I think it happens despite those sorts of involvements. I don't want to pass judgment on people either, however, because I've made the mistake personally as a chaplain and as a pastor of entirely canning conversations about dark occultism. And it's not right to do that because it is a topic. There are elements of truth within some of what is taught within those branches of magical practice. But it's not right to can conversations necessarily all the time. Sometimes it is appropriate just to shut a conversation down. Okay, particularly if you're in my position. I agree with that because I think that an individual who is trying to provide a service can get overwhelmed. But I've made the mistake, and I'll answer the question, but I think I already answered the question succinctly. But I made the mistake of, I remember at one point someone came to me who was pursuing, it wasn't Satanism, but they were saying that Lucifer was really the morning star and that Lucifer should be incorporated and so forth. And I made the mistake initially of trying to shut that conversation down. And what it did, more than disadvantage my ability to have that conversation, that is an interesting conversation to have. And Elizabeth said very interesting things about it as well. And, you know, the morning star used to be called Lucifer. Now it's Michael's War Prize. Venus is Michael's War Prize, and that's what Madame Blavatsky taught, and I teach that as well. But it was painful when I made that error because I could feel the hearts and the intention of the people against whom I had passed judgment, and it was not so much that I had a personal opinion about what they were doing, and a strong reaction to it, but it was that they were questioners. They were seekers, and they were perhaps and likely inquiring sincerely. And all I had to say was, as a knee-jerk reaction that I picked up from having viewed people behave in a similar fashion inside of Church Universal and Triumphant, and I regretted that. I regretted that, having that knee-jerk reaction to them. One group I didn't alienate, and the other group, again, it was an error that I made early on, but I think other ministers have made it in the past, and I've seen people attempt to protect the CUT information by saying, oh, this is ours and you can't share it, or and accurately saying this is the real information as opposed to the information from the derivative churches, and so forth, which I think the second approach has more validity than actually telling people that they can't share information or share our art even. I'm opposed to that for the most part when people attempt to say don't distribute our art, because I think that it's holy art we recognize and that it can be passed around. It doesn't make it any less holy that it's shared. People might not recognize it periodically. I can pick out all of the authentic art and also go and find the art that is from the other churches. And I have a lot of people within church, CUT, say, don't ever use this art that is not TSL licensed. And I go to it and I'm like, but those were the people preceding us. You know, there's a lot of good art out there that was generated during the period in which the Sindelar Jesus that we use was generated. So, you know, Guy and Ballard had that commissioned originally. We bought the license. I think we bought it directly from the Saint Germain Foundation at some juncture. But and there's all sorts of other art. Why is that art any less important? Or why is that art exterior to CUT? So that's a mistake as well, to say that all this other art and these other churches don't have valid answers, because periodically they do. And I think that art should be celebrated. I also acknowledge the update and the primacy of Mark and Elizabeth. And they're also vehicles, but they're unique. I like to look at it that way, because I think the germane transformation occurs. I'm on a tangent at this juncture, but occurs in a fashion in which Mark and Mother don't necessarily, quote unquote, reign supreme in terms of information. It's really Germain who eventually does, but it's because of it's through their mantle, it's through their auspices that transformation occurs. So they are unique, and they do belong on our altar, and they are there. People who look at who understand the altar layout will see the picture of Mark and Mother on the altar. It's standard to include them. So that's the answer. But other kinds of groups supporting witchcraft. Well, there are different kinds of witchcraft, first of all. Wicca is not the same thing as Satanism. And so what I think that you might not find in those groups is codification. I think that a sort of spiritual direction that I think only a church, not only a Christian church, but spiritual direction that Christian churches can provide. And I believe that CUT does provide that sort of direction. You would not necessarily benefit from that. And also, if you're interested in magic, we are an occult. We're a Christian church, but we're also an occult church. We're occult Christians. We're mystical Christians. So if you're into magic, why not explore white magic? We don't call ourselves a white witches. Generally, that's not the culture. But the reality is the form of occultism that is practiced and taught at CUT is a form of magic according to anthropological definition of the word magic. So we say, I've heard detraction against witchcraft with a good deal of frequency at Church Universal and Triumphant. I don't always agree when I hear it. I understand where some of it comes from. Right, like it is a form of, even though we don't identify with quote-unquote witchcraft, even if it's white witchcraft necessarily, at least not formally, it's not part of our culture, it is what we practice as a form of magic. We are also astrologers, so I don't know why someone would choose an entirely black dark path if power is actually derived through our teaching, and that we have the answer, as opposed to looking at the dark path where by definition there isn't an answer. So but again, it's not right to turn people out who are questioning, or who have, even oneself, if one turns to the dark side, whether or not you're actually so angry and so upset and in strife emotionally that you have those impulses. Eventually, Mary will come and fold you again. That will occur again. And what you need to do, if you're in CUT, is to just close the matter and not open your mind so wide that you're actually opening this floodgate of a lot of misqualified energy, dark black energy, and so forth. That it's okay to experience it in the moment, but then you really do have to reach a point of equilibrium where it's still exterior to your practice. And again, it depends upon your definition of what you mean by dark, but I have never personally, as a practitioner of CUT, found it at all useful to go into the realms about which people are speculating, beyond the fact that I consider Wicca, the true forms of Wicca, or the properly qualified forms of Wicca, to be white witchcraft, although there's a teaching that the universe is black and white. It's evil and good, but that's also present in things like Taoism, to the best of my awareness as well. But to foster evil, I personally, in my experience, has never been to my advantage ever. When I iron over and smooth over any sort of dark impulse I might have had during practice or during, trying to survive, and in using the craft, if you will, I've always had to smooth that over entirely and just say, let it, I release the fact that I had dark impulses, or it's not dark impulses so much as sometimes you're so angry that you just want to go to the dark side. As far symbologically, you want to just throw out all white occultism, all CUT, all Christianity, or CUT Christianity, and just say, I'll give myself to Pan or the dark forces, etc. And you might have that in the moment, but it's not really. It's not. It would throw you off. It would throw off your faith practice. I believe, at least in my experience, it did. To say that, oh, okay, that's okay periodically, symbologically, if that makes sense. There's a benefit to in this sort of occultism. There's a benefit to purity and single-minded vision, and I think people, question, why are you so strict? I had this argument the other day with a friend of mine. You're so regimented and strict, and yes, I am, because I benefit from that. I benefit the organization of being committed to the path of the light bearers, the right-handed path, and so forth, doing the best that I can on those. And purity is one of the, it's one of the chakras. Um, um, the, you know, I'm strict and adherent to this form of white occultism because it is to my benefit to be that way. I don't need to open up myself to a million other paths or left-handed paths to benefit, and I don't benefit. So people think it's about passing judgment, or it's about, I don't know, perfectionism and so forth, and it's really very practical. It's a very practical thing to be very regimented with your spirituality, because it will help you. As I've stated in previous videos, your mind is like a computer, and your body and your mind, the integration of your body and your mind, it all functions like a major computer. And the more efficiently you operate that machine, the better your results will be. I personally, if I, for instance, tomorrow just said, it's the Quran from here on out, or for the next 3 weeks, well, I would have to prepare so far in advance in order to study something like that, that it's not time. In other words, you have to be respectful of where you are on the path. It's not just that you're delayed or that you're behind schedule. It's that you are held back because God is presenting to you the information as he or she deems necessary. Right. But in any event, that's why I think that it's an obvious one. And then when it's not obvious and people want to be philosophical about the dark arts or atheism, and so forth, that it's okay to be philosophical periodically, but then at some point you really do have to just build walls to protect your information in the fortress that you built for yourself, so that you can thrive within a protected environment. And not letting other people do things that are going to disrupt the secret chamber. And periodically people will try to pull you down the path of other people's information, and it's okay to guard against that. So I think that the question when people start talking about the dark arts as opposed to being very adherent on a Christian path, and of course we're Buddhists and Jewish as well, and Hindu, and the other 4 mystical paths as well, not just Christian, but adherent to the other paths. It's not about passing judgment. It's not about excluding people who, periodically it's about excluding people, technically speaking, but we'll talk about that later. But it's not a challenge to someone's individuality or to someone's agnosticism to be very religious. You're not doing it because you want to be belligerent. You're doing it because you want to grow, personally grow, and help your community. And that's properly executed, properly functioning faith provides that. Yes, there's a lot of bad faith in the world, but it's not out there. The people who benefit from it and who the light bearers, people on a God-directed path, will tell you that it's better on the path for many, many people. And that's why. There are practical benefits to religion. That's my answer when people say you're passing judgment. I'm not passing judgment on anybody. I'm principally doing this for myself and my community, and that's that's it. So right, that's why to be spiritual. But magic, I mean, CT is the first place that I would go. Why was Elizabeth Clare Prophet the messenger who says she was the most powerful on the planet, and how is this justified? Well, I say at one point that she was the most powerful embodied guru on the planet, and I know other people in church who believe that. We call her the messenger, and we call Mark Prophet the messenger. They're the messengers. We never recognized a messenger after Elizabeth Clare Prophet. It went from the mantle went from Mark Prophet to Elizabeth. And we don't believe that the succeeding churches have the full Dharma. And we believe that it really stopped with Elizabeth. There's spin-off churches. The Heart Center is its own church. And I believe he's former CUT. Temple of the Presence is their own church, and they're both former CUT ranchers. In fact, I was just reading that Monroe Shearer was deposed during the Mull trial. A guy sued Elizabeth Clare Prophet after the allegation was that he spent $30 of his own money on a project and they bailed on the project. He wasn't properly compensated. There were other allegations about how culturally difficult it was for him to fit into the church. And we eventually settled out of court, but Monroe Shearer was deposed in that. So that's back in the 80s. But anyway, Monroe and Carolyn spun off to do Temple of the Presence. And they call themselves anointed representatives. We don't call them messengers from within the Summit Lighthouse. I think that they're more like a temple within the Summit Lighthouse, because I do think that they have some valid information, but I do understand the reason to keep that separate, because it's a forming our scripture is in a formative stage, and the Dharma is unfolding. This is progressive revelation, and I do think that the right shelter for that, or the correct institution, is Church Universal and Triumphant. However, I think we should look to what is going on in the other churches additionally. That's entirely accurate as well. So let's. Elizabeth, right? Who says she was the most powerful on the planet, and how is this justified? That's a long question. How is it justified? I think I'll answer that in another video. I think that's really like the subject of many, a 20 volume set of books. I think it's kind of like being born again in a way. It's like you awaken to the reality that, I don't think everybody in the church goes through this either. I think some people just see Mother as the central leader who's very wise, very good administrator, and someone to, maybe for many people, even someone to quote unquote follow. Like you'd follow someone who is very inspiring or interesting to you. Or in some instances, I think maybe it was the fact that she provided enough regimentation for people who really needed some sort of structure, for instance, that they weren't getting from their governments and so on, or they weren't able to maintain homes properly because of all the problems in the Akasha in their part of the world, for instance. And Mother had the wisdom to move them, but also I think the spiritual mandate and even the chakral power to support people in that as well. That's another reason. But for me, as far as guru, her as guru, right, and when you're in a church such as this, you receive um, inner temple teachings. For me, that comes in the form of periodically, not intrusively, but very politely eavesdropping on conversations, or I'll be included in conversations where I didn't even realize that we were talking about this particular topic. And sometimes it's from people who are long-standing communicants, very, very, like the top 0.01% of maybe people at CUT, like the remaining sort of the most powerful 20 or 30 people closest to the core who were um, right there at the ranch, even on the etheric level. Um, well, right. One of the reverends I heard one day say, just make this very, not almost casual remark about what an amazing thing it was to have been in the presence of a living guru, meaning Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And I started thinking about that and reading a little bit more about what guru means in different faiths, and how our group came upon that realization and started fostering that understanding. And as I mentioned, I've seen videos of Mother early on when they were making the transition from the Summit Lighthouse to CUT. Well, it stayed the Summit Lighthouse, in fact, but in the 70s, she went before the church board, to say that she was the new leader. She fought for it. I saw a video of it where she was clearly stating, "I know that I'm the vicar of Christ," and she was right. She was at that time the vicar of Christ at that point, time, space, time, and so on. So, right, I think we say that, I say that definitely, and it only empowers me. Um, and I I think it's like people who follow Osho, or people who follow other very persuasive religious leaders. Sometimes you don't need to look. Sometimes it is one person who is providing the answer for you and is sustaining. It's that relationship is sustaining enough for you to move forward. It's not always, rather, for you to continue to evolve. It's not always the case when people look at powerful religious leaders that they're all corrupt, in other words. And I think that it's okay to acknowledge when someone is just amazing or saint-like, or you know what I mean. And it's somewhat similar to how people responded, I believe, to Anandamayi Ma, the Indian saint. I would imagine it's similar to that. I don't know that the Yogi Raj adherents. I don't know how if they see him as like living God, or if he is considered to be an avatar. I don't know, and I don't know what he teaches about that either. I suspect that I know he claims to be part of a lineage, and I can look up all that information for you. But I do know that Nityananda, who is a Hindu leader, the Hindu leader, basically, in India, although there are different, schools, but he's one of the big hitters. There's also Sadhguru. There are a number, but Nityananda is part of a lineage and has a very serious following. They consider him to be a living embodiment of Shiva. So, for me, right, Mother, living guru, messenger, and I'm perfectly confident in saying that, and I don't at all feel like it's part of the faith. It's to me, it's integrated and just part of the faith. So that's the answer, irrespective of how you feel about it, or whether or not it's your thing, or whatnot. It is part of my faith and how I view my involvement as well. And it's not everybody who speaks in those terms at the church, but I know of several people, including ministers near the quote-unquote White Fire core, who believe that. Does that mean that there won't be a messenger succeeding her? I don't know that people believe that. I don't know who believes that or who doesn't. I don't generally, I don't really follow that because it tires me to hear people trying to hunt down, quote unquote, the next person. I think it's wrong-headed to do that. I think that it's either obvious or should be obvious. And Mother is continuously bringing her own self into being, as I've stated elsewhere. Okay, isn't CT just a form of late-stage Roman Catholicism? I like this one. No, it's not. Although I understand where people come up with that, and I understand why people see it that way. I was raised Roman Catholic. I think that it's intriguing to Catholics because it expands upon Catholic tenets in many respects. But if you're very Catholics, I don't think tend to teach too much. They're not really big Well, I say that they don't naysay against other religions, or they don't condemn other religions, but some of the teachings could be misconstrued. I think that's probably the case for all of the. I mean, ultimately, that's the case for all of the Christian churches, is that teachings can be misconstrued, or you can incorporate them properly and use them in the right way. But it's not just a form of late-stage Roman Catholicism. There are Catholic-seeming elements within it, and it's appealing to Catholics. But it really is its own path and its own faith. As I said, it's guru-centered, so entirely unlike Catholicism that way. It truly is too. It truly is the guru. It's more like, structurally, in a way, it's more like Hinduism. Although now we have reverence. Hard to say, because it's also very theosophic and so forth, and Kabbalah is front and center. Buddhism, although I think we tend to be more Theravadan. But there are Tibetan strands. I mean, it's an admixture, but it's also not simply. But it's syncretic and an admixture, but not artificially an admixture. It's when you're within it. If you've been in other churches before, you see everything as part of the whole. It's not. How do I put it? You're part of an unfoldment. You're part of you're a witness to progressive revelation when you're inside of it, and that includes information from 8 major world religions, the Theosophic and Gnostic traditions, but this particular messengerial legacy that began with Madame Blavatsky. So going back to Russia in the 1900s, right? That's important to remember as well. So it's really its own faith. It's not just a conglomeration of faiths. In other words, it's its own faith. But I think people on many different paths will find a home here. So Roman Catholicism, I can talk to you folks more. It would be nice to write a chapter in a book about that. But it's not, even the view on Christ is a bit different. And you're not taught about the higher self in those terms, in the same terms in our church as in the Catholic Church. You're not taught about the higher self. Jesus is the higher self. I almost don't want to do this final question, but I will. I want to invest in a New Age church, but don't want to support Trump. How should I proceed? Well, first of all, not all New Age churches are Trump supporters. We tend to be Republican and pro-Trump. I don't know why. I have theories about why, in fact. Things were pretty nutty in the 80s with Reagan, both inspiring people, I believe, and causing instability too, I'm sure, to many people. But the tension between the Soviet Union and the United States was pretty intense in the 80s. I think it's interesting that CUT is so Republican because you think that it's a really hippie thing to do, to move out, a very left-leaning thing to do, to drop out and go and live in community. But in this instance, not everybody was necessarily impressed, I suppose, by the American left. And I think because, as I mentioned, there are a lot of Christians in it, it tends to be very pro, well, they do teach pro-life at CUT, and so that's another tie into the conservative agenda, and I suppose it just happens to be, part of it is that people, too, I believe, are very religious within a non-traditional NRM. So this isn't about chaos and promoting anarchy and people dropping out and living in a commune for the sake of just doing it. It's really about religiosity and achieving it. So I don't see it as a casual faith. I think it's fine if people do, however, if people take solace in that, or if people just want a corner of it, or just want to be in its wake because they find it comforting. It should be comforting and not chaotic, and it's really chaotic only when we view it that way. There are other things about life. My theory is that there are other things about life that are chaotic other than church, but people talk about church in those terms so that the chaos, the topic, can be broached. Sometimes that it's helpful to do it that way, and sometimes it's not helpful. I think that at a certain point, people have to start directly confronting issues, and I'm definitely for doing that. But right, so you don't want to support Trump. I would say join CUT anyway and have your own political opinion, and I'm certain that that's what Mother would say too. Mother said, I remember one teaching, she said, someone asked her, my husband is not CUT, but I am. My husband is a different faith. How do we make it together? And she said, spouses don't have to have the same faith. So you're not for Trump, but you want to be in CUT. Raise awareness within CUT about why you're not for Trump. I think that's the right answer. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to review this and see if any of it's any good. And then I'll post it if I think you guys will find it interesting. Namaste. Keep working, the peace issues and so forth. Doing the work of the sixth ray, the service path. And we'll all regroup and discuss whatever additional topics you'd like to discuss. Thanks again. Okay, bye guys.